Hi, I'm Nicola Soares, president of Kelly Education, and this is your front row seat to the future of the education workforce on Wake Up and Teach. Today, I'm excited to kick off our podcast series with an overview of recruiting, hiring, and retention challenges our nation's school districts are facing every single day. Joining me in the discussion are two experts, Susanne Griffin, Vice President and Managing Director at Greenwood Asher Associates, who brings a wealth of experience in executive search and consulting for educational institutions. And then we also have Brad Beckner, Vice President of North Operations at Kelly Education. He oversees strategic initiatives to support schools in meeting all of their workforce needs. So together, we're going to explore collaborative solutions to the educator shortage and how the private sector can play a pivotal role in shaping the future of our education. So please join me in welcoming Susanne and Brad. So, Susanne, welcome. We'd love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So tell us a little bit more about your background.
First of all, thank you so much for including me in this conversation. Anytime I have an opportunity to talk about education, I get pretty excited. I started my career as a special ed teacher and then moved through becoming a principal, a district level administrator, chief academic officer, and superintendent. So I had lots of opportunity to learn in K-12. I do have to say, after I left K-12 and came into higher ed, I had great opportunity to reflect on what really made me who I am. And I have to go back to being a special ed teacher. It really informed my philosophy on education. It required a real focus on the unique needs of a student, the unique needs of a family, and not just their educational needs, but they were going through major life changes as they learned about what their child was going to need. It also helped me redefine how I thought about learning. It wasn't just the subjects of reading and math, social studies, science, although those are important. It really made me think about creativity and critical thinking and communication and problem solving, leadership, collaboration, adaptability. All of those things became important skills for the students that I worked with as they worked on growing and learning on their own journey. So when I think about the lessons that I learned from special ed and the philosophy I have now about education, it really is about making sure that every student, every family has the opportunity to step into their own brilliance.
Thank you so much. Brad, same question for you. Walk us through your journey to becoming an operations leader for Kelly Education. Tell us how your career path has influenced your perspective on education and has shaped really the way you approach your role.
Yeah, great question. And thanks for having me. It's great to be with you and Susanne as well. I had an opportunity nearly 30 years ago to start helping organizations find top talent in order for them to accomplish their goals. And since that journey began, I've really had an opportunity to really work with a broad range of primarily private sector organizations in doing just that. And in 2019, I joined Kelly Education and began the chance to focus primarily on K-12 public education substitute teacher programs. And it was really an eye-opener. I thought I knew a little bit about public education and how our students are taught in the classroom. And it was interesting to dig in and to see the significant challenges that our teachers, our administrators, our boards have in educating our students. And what that did for me, not only gave me a significantly more insight and appreciation for the noble work that they do, but it also tasked me with being much more knowledgeable about a broader range of topics and issues that impact public education. And I see that as really being foundational to kind of a focus on being more of a consultant and working with a broad range of stakeholders in order to accomplish their goals and to overcome some of the challenges that they have.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Brad and Susanne. Really enjoyed hearing more broadly about your backgrounds. Let's dig into today's topic, the state of the education workforce. So, Susanne, in broad terms, how would you describe the state of education with talent right now? How did we get here?
I have to start by saying there's no more rewarding or impactful role than being an educator. And that hasn't changed. The need for a strong public education system and its role in really creating a a stable democracy has not changed. I think what has changed is we are at a critical juncture. And certainly we have heard about the nationwide shortage of teachers and paraprofessionals, and particularly in areas where there is high demand and high specialization, STEM, special education, areas like that. There's greater turnover of building leaders. There's shorter tenure of district leadership. And we know that students suffer when there isn't a stable team that can learn and grow with them. When I think about how did we get here, I think we're still struggling with a lot of the same questions that we have for a long time. We're having important conversations about what we teach, about how we teach, about when we teach. We're having important conversations about safety and about mental health and meeting the needs of increasingly diverse student population. But I think what has changed is our ability to have those kinds of conversations in an environment that is not impacted by a unique set of geopolitics right now, by social unrest, social issues that have risen to the forefront of a lot of our conversations, economic instability and uncertainty for families, for districts, and an inability to have conversations without division. So when I think about all of that, and I think about, why are we where we are? I go back to, the Maasai tribe of Africa. And they have a greeting when they see each other. And the greeting is, "And how are the children?" And I think one of the things, and the response they want is, "All the children are well." And I think one of the things that maybe we have lost is that question in the work that we do, starting from a place of, "And how are the children?" and moving towards a place of, "And the children are well." Until we're able to ask that question and get that answer consistently, we have work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those insights. And, not only do these complex challenges are not impacting with just educators and our students within our schools, but they're also impacting our leaders. And I know that with Greenwood Asher and Associates and your role as managing director, you also do executive coaching, particularly for superintendents that you're placing in our districts today. So I'm just curious, how do you prepare district leaders for the changing environment that they're about to walk into?
Nikki, that's a big question. That's a little bit like, how do you help someone understand how to achieve world peace, right? Really complex. What I can say is that successful educational leadership really is a team sport. Certainly, it involves the superintendent, but it also involves a board. It also involves building administration. It involves the teachers, the support staff, the students, and the community. And everyone really has to be committed to building trusting, supportive relationships with each other in order for their education system to be successful. You've heard me say, and you and I have had many conversations about this, superintendents absolutely need to be held accountable, but they are not solely responsible for the outcomes of a school district. It is that broader leadership team that has to work together. So when I think about coaching, the reason I got into coaching was because it is not anything that is prescribed. It is personalized to that individual and their unique set of gifts, skills, talents, gaps, leadership gaps, and to their context. And when I think about what leaders have dealt with over the past few years, pivoting from in-person learning to remote learning and then back again, dealing with learning loss, dealing with the depression and anxiety that has increased both amongst students and amongst staff in the education setting, social unrest, protests, and encampments on their district campuses, meeting needs of students and community members who are increasingly polarized on the role of the school and on the role of district leaders. So when I coach people, we're really looking to develop those skills to navigate both the expected and the unexpected. And we work on what is important for that unique leader in their unique context. But having said all that, there's some really common themes. Communication and collaboration, goal setting, decision making. How do you develop a high performing team? How do you deal with conflict? And then for many, many leaders, many, many folks in education, how do you have a meaningful balance between work demands and life demands?
Yeah, that's well said. And it definitely is a balancing act. And this is a really good segue for Brad for this question. Any new superintendent that's coming into a new role understands that the demand for talent is fluctuating throughout the school year. So that makes workforce planning even more difficult than any other industry, I think. What have you seen in terms of districts? How are they better preparing for this volatility?
Yeah, great question, Nikki. And Suzanne, I love the how are the children and how are they doing? That's fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a significant amount of volatility. I don't think that's a surprise. And Suzanne talked about the teacher shortage. And certainly the pandemic just made that even more challenging, increasing the number of full-time vacancies that need to be addressed, as well as an exploding amount of daily absences. And so as I think about that strategy and dealing with the volume, I think there's a couple of things. I think that district leadership has had to be more focused on ensuring that they have the resources and they have the expertise in attracting and retaining talent, right? It's become much more competitive in the environment, not only between school districts, but also with alternative choices that individuals that possess the behavior and the skill sets that make them good educators have just in the world of work. And so I think that they've really had to become more creative, and they've had to balance the resources that they have that are necessary in order to maintain that pipeline of talent and getting everything else done that they need to do.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you, Brad. And Suzanne, Brad just mentioned some great insights and ideas for stabilizing the workforce. And definitely great leaders need to be a grounding force. However, sometimes that requires really big changes. How can leaders at the top guide meaningful change while being inclusive of all of their stakeholders within an educational community?
So that is a great question, and one that every leader is going to face. When they step into a leadership role in education, there is always going to be some tension between wanting change immediately, wanting results immediately, and what it takes to really be inclusive of your community. Certainly, prioritizing communication is critical. Leaders have to listen more than they speak. They have to be willing to collaborate, even with people who may appear to be have a different perspective than the leader. Communicating early and often really fosters trust and lowers resistance and skepticism. I think the other thing, they really have to balance improving their core work with innovation. Internal and external communities, your teachers, your students, your families, your business partners need to feel that you're doing a good job with the basics, that you're teaching children how to read. You're teaching them how to be critical thinkers. You're teaching them to be flexible and adaptable. You're teaching them how to be learners before you start asking for innovation. Because the strong fundamentals really does ensure that you have the resources, both human capital as well as financial resources, to do a good job supporting change. I think the other thing is because there's so much pressure to get results early, sometimes district do widespread changes. Leaders are expected to do widespread changes when really pilots or a more phased rollout of change would be better. In many ways, it allows time for the adjustments that are necessary. If there are problems, there aren't problems all over the district. There's a problem in a small spot. You can troubleshoot that problem before you do a broader scale implementation. I think the other thing is to recruit champions from within your district. Those folks who are early adopters, who really have passion around whatever change. Oftentimes they can be wonderful ambassadors to others who are in similar positions to theirs in helping them sort of navigate what they need to navigate through that change. And then, of course, professional development and coaching, and then using data, to monitor what's happening, to celebrate the successes, and then to be able to sort of troubleshoot and focus your efforts on those areas that maybe you're not getting the results you need.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And, typically when you're trying to implement sort of large scale workforce changes or different types of trainings or needs, how do you think district stakeholders can better manage that tension and stress that comes with all of that?
When I think about that, I think one of the ways is to ask more questions. Oftentimes, from whatever perspective we are, if we are, a district leader, if we're a teacher, if we're a parent, if we're an active student in our district, oftentimes we want to be heard, and that's a good thing. But the other thing is to remind ourselves we need to ask some questions. It's important for us to understand the perspectives of others. Oftentimes people make decisions not because for sound reasons. And so if we can understand their reasons, even if we may not agree with them, we can have a more informed conversation. I also think that thinking about how we can make changes that actually build on what we already do well is really critical. Innovation that strengthens or builds upon our ability to deliver high quality reading instruction or high quality math instruction is important to communities. They don't want us to introduce innovations that are going to compete with our ability to continue to sustain a high quality educational experience for all students.
No, absolutely. And, probably in so many of my conversations with, if it's chief human resource officers or superintendents, one of the biggest challenges that they face, Brad, is really dealing with shortages and vacancies and turnovers, especially with our building principals. And of course, all aspects of teaching, whether it be special ed or elementary or high school. I'm just curious, though, because I know that you're knee deep in this every single day. What are some of the key factors that make a district successful in managing its talent pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think I go back to one of the things I said before is that having dedicated resources that are focused on this important task is critical. So when I interact with superintendents, district administration, the ones that seem to be doing better are the ones that have the resources and have ability and have individuals that are skilled at recruiting talent and bringing that talent into the district. And so I think that resource component. Now, that's also a pretty significant challenge for many districts as well, that they just don't have that specialization or they don't have the capacity to have those resources available to go out and attract that talent. I think the other thing that's happening that is critical is that districts that set themselves apart as the employer or the district of choice is extremely important. So when we think about competition for top talent and the skill sets and behaviors that districts need in order to further the education of our children, that employer of choice is critically important. And that covers a number of different areas. That can be cultural. It can be experiential. It can be, in a lot of ways, it can be wage related, right? How do we position or how do they position themselves to be the choice that an individual makes when they have many choices in the marketplace as to where they invest their time and develop their career? I think the last piece of this puzzle is the experience that individuals have as they're being considered for positions. So what I'll call the candidate experience, communication channels, how districts access the talent that's in the marketplace, how they interact with that talent, how that talent feels about how they're being treated is extremely important, again, to make sure that at the end of the day, there's a successful hire of that critical talent that the district needs.
Yeah, that's excellent insights. And, Kelly Education, we've done just a lot of advocacy especially around teacher pay. So I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit. Susanne, considering your past roles, especially with in administrative roles within school districts, and as you know, school districts allocate a significant portion of their budgets to salaries and benefits, which often limits their financial flexibility. This particular rigidity, I think, restricts their ability to stay competitive with other industries. At least that's what we see. And as a result, we have a lot of our teachers that are actually leaving the profession right in the middle of their careers. What sort of cost-effective strategies that you might have deployed in the past or, as you look back now, that you would recommend that district leaders use to address these kinds of workforce challenges?
Nikki, that's a great question. And I do believe that, this is one of the great challenges because a strong education system is predicated on having exceptional talent in the classrooms, leading the buildings, leading the district. I think there's a couple of things that I think back now, some that we did relatively well, some that we didn't do as well as I wish we would have. First of all, I think promoting the stories. Many educators get into education because of the profound impact they can have on the lives of students and the lives of families. And I don't think we do a very good job of telling the really compelling stories that are happening every single day in our classrooms, and all the ways the teachers and principals and support staff go the extra mile to make an experience exceptional for a student. So that's one thing. I think the other thing we did a little bit of, which we could have done more of, is to create sort of grow your own or career ladders for people. The research will tell you that people who are already working for you are the best people to promote into positions because they're already committed, right? They already know the kids. They're there because they want to be there. And so thinking about ways that you can grow your own programs and engage business partners with you. Oftentimes, business partners are willing to provide scholarships or provide resources to individuals who they know are a pretty strong bet to becoming high quality teachers in their districts. And I think, I would be remiss if I didn't say we have to look at teacher salaries. We have to look at administrator salaries. And the reason we have to do that is because the cost of turnover is exceptionally high. We don't often calculate that. We think about what it costs to hire somebody, but what we don't think about is what it costs to replace somebody. And when experience walks out the door, when somebody who knows your children walk out the door, replacing that is at a much higher cost than just the dollar figure of the salary.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That cost of turnover is absolutely impactful. And, many of our school districts, I don't think, take that into consideration. But Brad, great segue for you. When we think about the critical importance of addressing sort of the long-term and the short-term staffing needs in our school, how does Kelly Ed support districts in meeting those demands?
First of all, for those of you that may not know, primarily Kelly Education, at least the organization that I lead, we're in the business of providing continuity of instruction in the absence of a full-time educator. So that's what we do. How we help, there's a few areas. First of all, our primary motivation is to ensure student achievement and the continuity of that lesson planning when there is not a full-time teacher. And what that allows the districts to do, it relieves a lot of their administrative burden. In fact, I was talking with a superintendent just the other day, and he said, Brad, one of the great things that happens in the morning is that I no longer have to spend a lot of time worrying about who's going to cover my classrooms. So well done. So we were really appreciative of getting that feedback, but it's so critically important. I think it's really lost on a lot of people that the time spent in trying to figure out how to cover absences is time lost in doing so many other critically important things that school administrators and educators need to do to ensure high levels of education. So I think that's a big part of it. I think obviously the improved absence coverage that we can provide I mean, if you think about it, our organization is made up of highly specialized and highly skilled individuals that do nothing but go into the marketplace and identify the talent that has the skill set and the behaviors that are going to be successful in the classroom. And then encouraging those individuals and working with those individuals to not only increase their skill set, but also to take assignments within the district. And so I think when you put that all together, it's a high value opportunity for school districts to consider. And it's very, very rewarding for myself and our teams to be a part of a successful education process within a district.
Brad, I just want to add from the perspective of somebody who was in the building and was experiencing exactly what you were talking to the superintendent about, and thinking about, yes, absolutely, having somebody in front of students is what we want to do. But what people don't often understand is, having high quality subs in classrooms on days when teachers cannot be there for whatever reason is really important for the other teachers in the building as well. Oftentimes when, and administrators, oftentimes when we had classrooms that didn't have a substitute teacher, those children were either sent into other classrooms or teachers were pulled from other assignments, or, was added to their assignment, or a principal or an assistant principal came out of the office and was in the classroom. So that means the kinds of supports that are available in other places are diluted as well.
Sure. Yeah, that disruption.
And when we think about kind of the impacts right now on mental health, work-life balance, what people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis in our schools, this kind of work is absolutely critical in ensuring both continuity of instruction for students, but also support for the adults in the building.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Susanne.
Yeah, Susanne, really great points. And, Brad, that kind of leads me to a second question for you. What role do you see ongoing training and professional development playing in retaining teachers, also our substitute teachers and support staff once they're placed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's critical to not only have the quantity of the talent that's required, but to ensure that we have the quality. And one of the things, or several things that we focus on at Kelly Education to ensure is that we understand the skills and behaviors that are going to make an educator, substitute educator, successful within the classroom. And so as part of our vetting process and evaluation of talent, we have vast experience and we have the resources to make the right choices. Beyond that, it's about training. It's about proper orientation specific to the district and the building and the classroom that our substitute educators are going to be supporting. And then a vast amount of professional development that's being offered to ensure that our talent is engaged, that they're up to speed with the latest information and details to make them extremely effective in classroom management, making sure that the lesson plans are being continued, and that ultimately they're successful in making sure that the education that our children are so deserving of receive that education.
No, I love that. So thank you for that. And it's been a really robust conversation thus far. So I have a final question for both of you. As we look into the future, what specific trend or trends do you believe will most significantly impact the education workforce in the next few years? How can districts strategically prepare now to effectively address this challenge? Susanne, let's start with you.
When I thought about this question, there were a couple of things. And again, I have to start with compensation for educators. It has to be an ongoing conversation. When we look at, teachers earn less than college grads with comparable jobs. And so we've got to be thinking about how do we support these people if we expect them to be caring for our children, if we expect them to be caring for our children. So I think we've got to look at that at all levels of the organization. I think another thing is how does remote and hybrid work sort of interface with education? What is that going to look like? There are more places that are offering remote or blended learning options to students, and their workforce then will need to adjust to that as well. And along with that, kind of AI, technology, virtual and augmented reality. There are more and more students who are learning in an immersive environment. And there are opportunities that presents that we have not had in the past. And so sort of thinking about how do we use that in a way that is positively impactful. We can wait for it to happen to us, or we can help define how that is going to be used to strengthen what we already do. And then finally, I think one of the things that's on the horizon that's really interesting to me, and I think is going to spark some really critical conversations around education, is micro schools. And these are schools that are popping up that are small, they're personalized, they're focused on a particular population of students. They're really sort of trying to promote innovation and a very strong sort of community orientation. And I think in our attempts to sort of contain costs, we've consolidated, we've brought things together, and we've lost some of the power of community around schools. And going back to that question that the Maasai tribe asks each other, how are the children? If we've got schools that are the size of small cities, it's very hard to know. So I think there's going to be some really interesting conversations around that and what we learn from some of the efforts that are happening in that area.
Brad, what's your perspective? What are some of the most immediate challenges do you think that many of our districts are going to be facing?
Well, I have to piggyback a little bit off of Susanne on the alternative education models. How is our lesson plan being delivered? I think that's something that we need to continue to take a look at. I think that there's still, in my opinion, a very large population of educators that will be retiring in the near term. We've been dealing with that trend for a few years, but I think we still have a little ways to go as it relates to that. Probably the most concerning trend that I'm seeing, and we've talked for a long time in terms of teacher shortages. And it was referenced before that we're now seeing an acceleration of leadership shortages. So when we think about building principles within the public education system, that's now one of the leading areas of turnover, and that's very alarming for a number of different reasons. And when we think about it, even within the school administration, the superintendent levels and the leadership posts within the administration of school districts, the turnover there is significant as well. So as I think that we're seeing some stabilization as it relates to the educator shortage and some stabilization as it relates to having talent in the classroom, I'm very concerned over the next 2 or 3 years what that turnover at the administration and leadership, building leadership level looks like, and how do we recover from that. I think lastly, and Susanne talks about the criticality of ensuring that there is wage parity for the skills and experience that educators bring to the classroom. And we have seen, from my perspective, we've seen some progress there over the last couple of years. My concern is that with fiscal cliffs and funding issues and budget constraints, I'm concerned that we might see an erosion of that we might see some reversal of some of the progress, some great progress that's been made around ensuring that wages are not only attractive, but they're competitive and they support individuals and their families in a way that they need to be supported. So I think I'm hopeful that the improvements that have been made, especially coming out of the pandemic, continue. But that I think that there is a budgetary risk to that equation that we need to be sensitive to.
Yeah, well said. So I just want to thank both of you. It's been a really interesting conversation, and hopefully we'll connect again in the near future.
Great. Thanks so much. It's great to be here.